So there's a video out there called Debunking Madvocate, a failure at understanding film, where the thumbnail misspells manipulation. The video accuses him of lying about Spider-Man No Way Home and grifting in his video. Now what I find particularly interesting is that he never actually plays any clips from Madvocate's video to substantiate the claims about what he's saying. It would show a lot more transparency if you actually played what he was saying instead of recounting it in a way which could be inaccurate, which it very often is. Just a reminder not to harass anyone I respond to, keep things civil when discussing the work. With that said, let's proceed.
So, about a year ago, I came across Spider-Man Way Home Machine Broke. After watching the first 10 minutes of this thing, it felt as if though I was suffering from an aneurysm of sheer stupidity. This video has since then been living rent-free in my mind, and I'm now here to collect what is due.
Well, it sounds like he really means business if this video has been living in his head for over a year.
Madvocate seems to find it unbelievable that anyone would believe Mysterio's narrative. That being his opening statement.
That is actually not what his opening statement is. His opening statement is that the world, in a general sense, shouldn't believe it.
How in the mother-hubbing heck does Mysterio's exposed piece actually end up convincing the world?
But he also doesn't address the presence of one Alex Jones, J. Jonah Jameson, as played by J.K. Simmons. Here the film presents a conspiracy theorist peddling the claim that there was a massive cover-up to protect Spider-Man and his actions from scrutiny during the London attack, heavily implying that there was foul play involved.
Madvocate, or most people who agree with this video, are not contesting that Jameson is making these claims on his show. The point being made is that Peter has too many resources and connections for the world to buy into this narrative, and the outcome relies on Peter, S.H.I.E.L.D., and the victims of the drone attack not sharing crucial evidence that would have discredited Mysterio's video before it even dropped. I think the dead giveaway is that he would have been found in a motion capture suit on the bridge that has drones and projectors all over, which would have been found within the first day of investigation.
He backs this up with a faceless video of Spider-Man and dies in the hallway while covered in a mocap suit with an arm panel linked to the drones.
He has an army weaponized drone, Stark Technology.
Yeah, the drones that destroyed one thing away from the bridge, which happens to be Happy's jet. The drones that were only hunting down Spider-Man's friends, who coincidentally happened to be the only ones who side with Spider-Man, and were aware of Mysterio being a fraud, including Happy. The drones that were shooting at Spider-Man himself. The drones that malfunctioned for 56 seconds, revealing that the Elemental and Mysterio are just projections in front of a crowd of witnesses.
So, let's address what that means for the movie when it portrays a conspiracy theory and how those actually work. The definition of a conspiracy theory, according to Merriam-Webster, a theory that explains an event or set of circumstances as the result of a secret plot by usually powerful conspirators, and from Google, a belief that some secret but influential organization is responsible for an event or phenomenon. This in context of Far From Home would suggest that a secret organization, akin to S.H.I.E.L.D., which Nick Fury was the director of, would be responsible for the information regarding the details of the London attack, which Nick Fury was present for, giving fuel to the theory.
The problem is that S.H.I.E.L.D. has too much evidence to fail to refute what Mysterio has to say. Mysterio claims that he sent the Elemental back through a dimensional rift.
I managed to send the Elemental back through the dimensional rift.
Whatever the hell that means. But the Elementals would have been proven to be fake, since footage would have shown that it was filled with drones and projectors. And Mysterio clearly doesn't have powers if he's wearing a mocap suit to display his suit. So obviously something about this Mysterio character is staged. So why would S.H.I.E.L.D. being involved hurt Peter's credibility?
A common tactic by conspiracy theorists is to present any context-relevant evidence or information which can be presented in a manner that proves their point, then using it to dismiss pre-established facts and logic in order to further ascertain that their theory is the absolute truth regarding the context in question. It is essentially a dismissal strategy wherein the context of the situation is misrepresented through bad faith argumentation and any counterpoints are rejected outright as delusional or as an appeal to the status quo.
Sure, but many of these would be easy to see through. There's no spinning that Mysterio doesn't have powers if he's using a mocap suit to stage an event. There's no spinning that the Elementals were always fake because they would have been seen being projected by the drones. This is also ignoring how the Daily Bugle aren't the only influences out there. Not only would other news organizations highlight the truth, but other superheroes would have stood up for Peter after he helped them save the world in Endgame. And given the world that they're in, which motivated Mysterio's actions to begin with, they would have been listened to the most.
These days, you can be the smartest guy in the room, the most qualified, and no one cares. Unless you're flying around with a cape or shooting lasers from your hands, no one will even listen.
Now with that bit of understanding and logic in mind, ask yourself the question, How is the conspiracy theory presented in the film? Well, J. Jonah Jameson presents it as a dismissal of the previously known information regarding said London attack, and treats it as an absolute truth of the matter. He essentially claims that the existence of the footage that he had access to disproves all other evidence which would exonerate Spider-Man from wrongdoing.
So when there's evidence of Mysterio wearing a mocap suit, evidence of the elementals being fabricated through drones and projectors, evidence of Mysterio wearing a wrist device connected to the drones, that gets dismissed by the world because Mysterio releases a video where he states the elementals are real and that he does have powers and that Peter sent those drones to attack the people that are on his side and himself in the process. Not to mention that the Bugle isn't a reputable source. It's stated to be controversial, and most people would have seen this as the grift that it is.
On the controversial news website, thedailybugle.net.
Now, I can believe some people would believe this, but this should widely be seen as a hoax in the world of the MCU.
This is an important detail because this is how conspiracy theorists argue, and there's real-world precedence for this method being functional. E.g., Donald Trump's big election lie, which is still a major talking point for Republican nominees.
So I always find it weird when people bring up Donald Trump when discussing MCU content, because the big difference between our world and the MCU is that the biggest influences in the MCU are the variety of superheroes, who can grab evidence that is normally difficult for us to obtain and provide better influences than we have in our world. Donald Trump would probably be in jail by now if Daredevil was real. What do you know about Trump and the Epstein files?
I know what you're talking about. Okay.
And that's just talking about street-level heroes. Wilson Fisk tried many of these same tactics in Daredevil Season 3, and he still got caught and the public hated him. And that was when he was alive to defend his position, while Mysterio is not.
The misinformation regarding the dangers of the COVID-19 virus as well as its vaccine.
Okay, but how successful were those conspiracy theories? Most of America has taken these vaccines anyway in spite of these conspiracy theories. You'll find similar data in other countries, which I can link below if you're curious.
And from further into the past, there is the moon landing being faked and flat earth theory.
But notice how those theories are constantly ridiculed. A big reason we don't believe the earth is flat is because we have crystal clear evidence proving the opposite. Flat earthers are commonly seen as delusional for this reason, which would be similar for people who think Mysterio was right. There's far too much that is documented for the general public to deny it.
All of these conspiracy theories share one particular form of logic when being presented. They skewer details and project malicious intent upon some entity or group of people.
Right, but that's not what Madvocate is contesting. He's contesting the idea that they'd be successful in tricking the world. It's like if the world was to believe Alexander Pierce after the end of Winter Soldier. That wouldn't make sense, and that's why they didn't have the world believe him or Hydra.
Now, let's check in with the MCU to see if there is precedent for people taking serious issue with superheroes, which would make them more susceptible to manipulation in this context. Like a political legislation regarding their actions and accountability. There's the Sokovia Accords narrative plot in Captain America Civil War, wherein the governments around the world made an effort to hold superpowered individuals accountable for the reckless destruction that they caused when attempting to save the day.
These aren't the same situations. In Civil War, they're showing footage of what actually happened to support the claims that they're making. The government wasn't exposed for fabricating evidence of these superhero battles, whereas Mysterio would be. It reaches a point where even the superheroes themselves have a reason to feel guilty, so the blowback they received is rooted in the reality of their actions.
This means that there is a desire in-universe to hold superpowered individuals accountable for the destruction resulting from their actions and engagements.
Which would include Mysterio, the owner of the drones that caused so much damage to begin with.
Which there was plenty of in the finale to Far From Home, and with Mysterio dead, leaving Spider-Man as the only living superpowered individual to hold accountable from the event.
The problem isn't that anyone would try to hold Spider-Man accountable. The problem is that they're doing this for very obviously wrong reasons. You know, it's funny, this is actually what's interesting about J. Jonah Jameson when he's handled well. In spite of his agenda against Spider-Man, even he recognizes when he has to retract his claims, which is what happened when Spider-Man recorded evidence of Mysterio being a fraud in the comics. It's a bit ironic that while these movies were adapting this character, they missed the most sensible outcome once there's evidence of Mysterio's fraudulent behavior.
None of what I just went over was even mentioned in Madvocate's video.
Because none of it refutes the reasoning that he gives.
Instead, there's a massive effort made to prove that the evidence presented by Mysterio shouldn't be believed by anyone in the universe whatsoever. He goes into great detail about all the available evidence that the investigating federal body would gain access to over the course of a thorough investigation, which is fair play. That evidence should become available over time. but he equates it to everyone in the world having access to that same information within a week of the London event.
I'm so confused here. Where did he say literally everyone should be on Spider-Man's side? His issue is that this convinced the world, hence why he mentioned the court of public opinion being a major issue for him.
This claim includes video evidence from the drones after getting dismantled by technicians working the case, also suggesting that nobody, such as fake Nick Fury, made any statements to clarify the reality of the situation, which there is no evidence of him doing or not doing, thus making it a moot point, but a nice edit.
He literally shows evidence in the video. Peter tries to bring up Nick Fury, but this gets dismissed immediately.
Nick Fury was there the entire time. Just ask him and he can explain everything.
Nick Fury has been off planet for the last year.
Oh, how do you know that? Fury probably notified you and your team, right? Guess he kinda forgot to mention that he'd be having alien shapeshifters impersonate him and Maria Hill. Not like this is an important detail to mention, especially when they have permission to cover their professional duties in the public eye.
You see, this is what I mean by how you should show clips of what he's actually saying, because you're getting facts wrong about what he says.
While the flow of information on the internet may be the greatest and fastest spreaders of news to the point where it often turns into a media circus, it would more than likely take several weeks, if not months, for all of this information to reach a state of public awareness.
Why? This is one of the biggest news events and the world would have great interest in learning about it, especially before making their judgments of who is right or wrong.
Now, I do agree that intelligent people with the appropriate information would not believe the conspiracy theory and would recognize it for the slander that it is. However, that doesn't mean not one individual, let alone 1,000 New Yorkers, wouldn't believe the conspiracy, since most people in the universe probably does not have all the appropriate information to be able to recognize the truth.
Yeah, because S.H.I.E.L.D. said nothing, nobody shared concrete footage to disprove Mysterio, and nobody brings up that Mysterio was in a mocap suit and that the elementals themselves were obviously fake.
All that we as the audience members of the film see is that enough people from New York believe Mysterio's lies and begin harassing Peter Parker, which enables the plot of the film to unfold.
Which is nonsense. This video from Mysterio shouldn't be able to destroy their reputations, but it somehow does.
Throughout their YouTube career, Madvocate has seemingly upheld a stance dictating that opinions and reviews of artistic media, e.g. films, can be objective should one utilize facts and logic when establishing one's perspective of the art in question. This stance is a failure to recognize one's own biases and subjectivity that establishes a person's perspective on anything and everything.
Alright, I don't care about any of this, so before I skip ahead to when the writing is actually being discussed again, I don't see how any of this proves that Madvocate is grifting, which is a claim he makes later in the video. Having a perspective on objectivity and media criticism is a perspective, not a grift.
This approach to criticism is somewhat asinine in its view of artistic media, as it often attempts to take everything that has been presented at face value or outright disingenuously showcasing parts of the art. For example, when someone presents a timer to a film scene or sequence in order to prove how long an action took to complete. In Madvocate's case, it's often showcased without taking into account different things happening at the same time, such as when there is an insert cut of a reaction shot from a character or the like in the middle of a sequence, all the while his timer continues ticking.
I will grant that some of these shots may be taking place concurrently, but because so much of the dialogue is contingent on what was shown before, it's fair to say that most of this is in real time and doesn't dispute the core of Madvocate's point, being that the people would have seen the projection malfunctioning and thus proving the elementals are fake.
This pedantic logic is the single most consistent trend across all of Madvocate's videos that I've watched. It is an endless barrage of highlighting minor details or uttered phrases as a means of questioning the level of intelligence presented within a film.
How is this a minor detail? It's major that there is evidence that the elementals are fake. This is pivotal to the entire case. Are you also talking about when he remarks on the CW flash fights? Because those aren't minor details either. Barry's failure to use his powers is what enables the conflict in many of these episodes. You don't have to personally care, but claiming that these things are minor details misses the point as to why these things are being brought up in the first place.
All without entertaining internal logic nor attempting to comprehend the intent behind the events that unfold.
His criticism is the failure to maintain internal logic, and the intent of the creators can only take you so far. I don't think the writers meant for the Flash to be stupid, but he oftentimes is.
But logic isn't the only thing being omitted either. When attempting to critique a narrative, it appears to be almost common practice to exclude details that disprove or doesn't fit in the logic of said criticism. For example, part of the opening sequence of No Way Home is Peter Parker swinging his way back to Aunt May's apartment. At least, that is how Madvocate presents said event. In actuality, there's a fair bit more that happens leading up to Peter Parker returning home.
That doesn't change his criticism. His criticism is that Peter ensures the exposure of his identity by doing this. What happened beforehand doesn't change that Peter did this and had other options.
So let's go through it all, step by step, and attempt not to miss out on anything of relevance. First, he grabs MJ after the doxing happens. Make no mistake, this event is a doxing attack, and swings several blocks away from the people on ground level that were harassing her. Second, he stops swinging and lands down on top of a bridge where he calls Ned for a funny joke, followed by several helicopters descending upon their location, continuing the targeted harassment at a greater scale. Third, realizing that swinging around the city isn't going to cut it for evading the helicopters, Peter Parker elects to dive into the New York underground, which he traverses until reaching Queens, where he and MJ re-emerge. Fourth and finally, he swings the last remaining distance to get home and crawls in through his bedroom window. Notice how if you omit details from a sequence of events, you can easily make it seem far dumber than it actually is.
You didn't add anything to what he said. He's arguing that Peter shouldn't have done this at all. What's weird about this is that I actually have a defense for this myself, so it's awkward hearing this guy failing to make one that makes sense. The defense that I would make is that if I'm Peter Parker, and my identity is being stated without evidence, I would still want to keep my loved ones safe because many people will believe the claim anyway. So entering May's home is more understandable when you put into context that Peter wants to protect his loved ones from whatever may happen. And while the footage itself was cropped, it could have been cropped by Jameson himself for dramatic effect, as he wanted to build up to the reveal. I imagine it was Jameson who even put up the image of Peter's face, not because that was all he had, but rather it was the clearest image you can share of him. You could still see the side of Peter's face or hear his voice in the background, so the footage would still identify him.
By including every step of the way, it becomes apparent that the sequence was not rushed together, nor did it showcase Spider-Man as an idiot.
But you didn't prove that Spider-Man wasn't an idiot. All you ever said was that other stuff happened beforehand. That doesn't disprove his issue of Peter going to his house and ensuring his identity is known.
Throughout this entire sequence, Peter Parker consistently makes smart decisions for someone his age and successfully beats the helicopters to his home, thus mitigating the chances of someone recording him crawling in through the window, which would be concrete evidence confirming his identity as Spider-Man.
He didn't mitigate this. Anyone around could have recorded this, which is what happened in this movie. I don't understand this counterpoint. This isn't stupid because Peter made smarter decisions before. It's almost like Madvocate is criticizing the decision that he thinks is dumb.
All of this is simply glossed over in Madvocate's video, where it is simply stated that he takes her, MJ, to his apartment. It's Aunt May's, but I'll let it slide. Thus confirming that he, Spider-Man, is Peter Parker. Now, before someone comes up with the ever so brilliant response of, "That wasn't Madvocate's point," let me iterate upon what I said earlier. Spider-Man got doxed in the opening of the film, and he was accused of murder. These two facts together makes it highly likely that regardless of what Peter Parker did in this scene, it wouldn't impact whether or not people gained confirmation that he is Spider-Man.
But if he has a chance to have it disproven, in most cases he would. Like I said, you can defend this decision, but the reasoning you're giving is really strange. Why would the likelihood of people believing it at first matter if he can disprove it later? That doesn't counter what he said.
His secret identity would be ruined no matter if he went straight home or played hide and seek with the helicopters.
Not true. He could have camped out for a while, and if S.H.I.E.L.D. interfered, as they should have, they could help him cover up his identity, which is what they literally almost did with Iron Man.
The very next scene after everyone is back in Aunt May's apartment is the federal agents busting in and securing evidence from their home. Like the Iron Spider suit, which would be a dead giveaway, confirming that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are in fact one and the same.
Except searches need to be based on probable cause, which May outlines when explaining the Fourth Amendment.
You know the Fourth Amendment?
Sure.
Unreasonable search and seizure?
Probable cause relies on a reasonable belief based on facts that a crime has been committed, so they can't just search his home immediately, and if he called May to discard the evidence and have Happy hold it, then yes, he can avoid this.
Madvocate's whole argument attempted to portray Peter Parker as a poorly written character within No Way Home. for having made a questionable decision.
Complete straw man. He didn't say he's a bad character just because of this decision. He makes other criticisms of Peter's character in this video that you happen not to address here, like how he threw all of his villains in the condo instead of releasing them one by one from the sanctum.
Which, as Madvocate implied, resulted in his identity being confirmed. He attempts to justify this criticism by pointing to times Peter Parker was in intense situations, like Endgame, making it appear as if though there's an inconsistency within the writing. Yet, as I just went over, the identity was beyond saving the moment Peter Parker was doxxed.
I don't know if it's beyond saving if there was never concrete footage shown of him in the suit. I mean, sure, there could have been, but from Peter's perspective, he doesn't know that.
On top of Madvocate omitting the vast majority of the sequence of events that showcases Peter Parker not being an idiot.
You didn't disprove this at all.
Madvocate then goes on to simply point the finger at all the evidence that could possibly be accessed in-universe to disprove the conspiracy theory, without discussing nor taking into account how it would be possible for someone to access this evidence or to fall for a lie of this magnitude.
The evidence would be accessible through the news and public statements. Does he need to explain that?
Essentially not doing the, proverbially speaking, analytical legwork to assess and prove how the film doesn't make sense. It is simply implied through pointing out various relevant details of the film and then drawing a definitive implication of the film's quality. Utilizing a pedantic argumentative logic, Madvocate hyperfixates on these details as flaws of the film, while throwing shades at the writers of the film over something he himself is being unable to understand or suspend his disbelief over. No matter how simple it is to put two and two together for his whole tirade to fall apart logically. For example, Madvocate emphasizes that the Spider-Man suit has recording capabilities and plays a large section of the Far From Home finale to showcase existing evidence disproving the accusations. Except he neglects to realize, while showing, that the recording capabilities in the Spider-Man suit was the AI Tony Stark installed in the Homecoming suit, which had access to Stark Industries servers. Video footage, as any YouTuber will inform you of, requires significant storage space to prevent it from overwhelming the recording device.
Okay, I have mountains of recordings on my computer that are longer than Far From Home itself. It still runs just fine. I mean, hell, I'm recording right now for this video, and my computer is running just fine while I'm looking over the script. So why is this relevant?
Which in this context would be the Spider-Man suit with specialized optics and electronics for his gadgets. My point being that the suit more than likely won't have enough storage capabilities built into it or access to a server.
Stark technology isn't capable of giving Peter minimal space to record an event. Stark technology isn't capable of matching the technical feats of your average cell phone. You see why I'm immediately dismissing this condescendingly delivered counter?
Mysterio had the EDIF glasses, which possessed unlimited access to the Stark servers and more than likely blocked access for Spider-Man. But none of this matters, even if the footage was available to be presented to the public.
Well, let's set aside the suit for now, because Edith itself should be recording everything. Age of Ultron showed that Stark AIs record everything. There should be an activity log of events. Even if we ignore the suit, Mysterio is screwed.
Madvocate himself pointing out that Mysterio's footage should fall under scrutiny for having been revealed a week after the event in question. That same logic could simply be applied against any footage from the Spider-Man suit, claiming it to have been falsified.
Which is why he argued that the footage should have been released immediately afterwards instead of a week later.
Wait, this dumbass scheduled his video to be sent out through an anonymous source a week after his death. A week where Spider-Man, Happy, Fury, Maria Hill, their team, or any of the witnesses could have immediately reported what really happened at the bridge and the type of technology that was used, which would then make this video suspicious of being fake when it was released. I say any of these people could have reported this to the authorities or the news, because nobody bothered apparently. After all this chaos and destruction caused by lies and deceit, they just went home.
Regardless, Madvocate's point is simply to highlight a perceived negative of the film. The issue is that his approach is lacking in logic in regards to context and following the through line of the film.
I'm sorry, but every counter you've made is lacking in logic. None of what you're saying does any favors to the film. If anything, you've made it clear that the integrity of the story is hard to defend.
We are instead ham-fisted with a series of surface-level critiques that omit details from the subject matter that it proves the internal logic of the film is sound. Not to mention that his own logic is hypocritically applied exclusively from one perspective only, and not both sides of the argument, making his whole point moot.
A video expressing someone's opinion is often going to represent one side, so I don't see why this is inherently an issue. Not every review needs to respond to the other side, which Madvocate does anyway because he responds to defenses that he's seen.
It is as if though he believes that listing the negatives of a film in a pros-cons sort of manner is doing the full legwork of an analytical essay, rather than a step along the way to assess something's intrinsic value.
Okay, so we're gonna move on from the repetitive word salad because I want to start seeing more relevant points being made.
Madvocate's level of logic is simply that of a contrarian trying to prove their point by pointing the finger to smaller anecdotal details.
Or he's just making a review of a movie. Crazy idea, I know.
And in a cynical manner exclaiming that this is evidence supporting their claims, choosing to ignore whether or not said details are impactful to the overall narrative or experience for their audience.
His focus isn't on the experience the audience has, it's on what the story has to offer, and he does focus on if these details are impactful to the narrative. His larger criticism is that the setup for the memory spell is built around events that don't make sense,
instead presenting themselves as a true intellectual capable of seeing through the quality of the film, essentially positioning themselves as above general audiences and of greater intelligence.
Can you show me where he has said or implied anything like that?
In spite of that, the main actionable intelligence on display is simply just questioning the film's events and logic, while omitting details and logic relevant to the film's narrative, which could disprove any of their points made. It's a disingenuous form of critique that is upheld through quick and clever editing, mixed with a mind-numbing background beat and a monotone narration that hides the true stupidity on display, by presenting visual clips that could portray skepticism or disbelief along with exclaiming a similarly presented statement or question. Madvocate performs a manipulation of their audience's perception of the film in question.
This is a rather disingenuous framing of Madvocate's video, and displays a failure to understand how video essays are made.
Through this barrage of gish-galloped critique, we as an audience of these videos are overwhelmed by a non-stop barrage of skepticism and are ironically subjected to a similar form of manipulation to that which Mysterio attempted to pull in Far From Home. That appears to be the intent of the videos posted to the channel. It's a grift to appeal to current populist ideals of mainstream culture, that we, the general audiences, are being fed garbage with stupid written all over it.
So let me get this straight. It's a grift to highlight the failures in the media that's being released? Even if he was incorrect about No Way Home, which he isn't, since that movie is really bad, how is it grifting to share a negative perspective of a movie?
All the while never addressing how or why we got to this perceivable point and attempt to understand the pitfall that we find ourselves in currently with mainstream artistic media.
When reviewing what is there, it's not required to talk about what happened behind the scenes that led to what got here. You absolutely can if you'd like to. You can talk about the production choices that were made and whether they were good choices or bad choices, or what this implies about the process, but again, that's not a requirement.
Madvocate loves to latch on to the idea of objective criticism, while failing to understand the very concept of objectivity. The moment one injects positivity or negativity into a critique, it ceases to be objective.
Sure, but the facts and reasoning you bring to the table can be objective.
Essentially, when establishing a sequence of events that within a film and drawing attention to who is responsible for it happening, it is an objective observation. However, once attempting to ascertain whether the sequence is good or bad in any capacity, it becomes subjective. I am hereby imploring Madvocate to do some actual analysis and using their own words, thoughts and logic to present a conclusive argument for the level of quality that the film holds, instead of constantly pointing things out on the screen like the Leo meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Pointing out the details of the work is required in an analysis of it. Like, I'm sorry if that bothers you, but that's just part of the process.
My advice for anyone wanting to understand films and the process of filmmaking better, which in my opinion should be part of the criticism process, to seek out YouTube channels or the like with inside knowledge of how films are made. I would recommend Pony Smasher, a channel run by the director of films such as Lights Out, Shazam, and Annabelle Creation. He has highly insightful videos on how a film is made and why certain relatively easily observable faults emerge during a film's creation. In his own words, Movie making is nothing but problem solving.
I'm sure many people are happy to look at the production process on their own time, but this isn't required to review what's there. Movies should be able to stand on their own so that the work can speak for itself. Some people stick with what's in the movie, and others base their assessment on outside details to make larger points against the production decisions, either of which are valid in my eyes and can bring engaging discussion. But why knock one down as if only your way is valid? I thought you were supposed to be on the side of judgment being subjective.
Let's not forget that Madvocate is the dude who suggested that Spider-Man should hide from helicopters by sitting on the roof of a skyscraper and wait for everything to calm down, by omitting that the scene in question featured helicopters altogether.
This attempt at a gotcha doesn't work since the noise can still die down as trusted allies within S.H.I.E.L.D. can help debunk the narrative. Not that they end up doing this in the film anyway.
The helicopters were harassing Spidey, which he evaded by traveling through the underground from wherever they were at the start of the film to Queens. Helicopters, for those whom may be unaware, are capable of omnidirectional flight, meaning that if Spidey were to ascend a building to sit on its rooftop, they could simply follow him and continue with their harassment.
Yeah, as opposed to entering his house where helicopters can show up anyway.
The manner in which Madvocate argues about movies is the cinema criticism version of the Gish-Gallop argumentative strategy, which is to say, it's a manner of throwing as much shit at the wall as rapidly as possible. In this case, mostly through vague implications and random inserts of cool editing, to make discerning any actual critical or argumentative flaws awkwardly difficult and extremely time-consuming.
What do you mean vague implications? It's a vague implication that Peter should have access to recorded evidence, or that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s absence is unexplained? Oh yeah, there's no point where this guy addresses Madvocate showing Peter bringing up Nick Fury only to be dismissed for a nonsensical reason. That part of the discussion was completely ignored, so I find it ironic that he accuses Madvocate of withholding information.
This guy loves to throw critique at films in an attempt to make it look stupid. Yet he can only succeed by omitting facts and presenting a dubious logic. His level of intelligence absolutely astounds me.
You serious?
Well, I think it's safe to conclude that Madvocate is not guilty of being a grifter.
I don't believe any of the charges against you are gonna stick.
This response did a very bad job of addressing the core of Madvocate's arguments and proving any ill intent on his part. While I don't think Madvocate's review is 100% flawless, he generally makes good points against No Way Home. So if you're in the spirit of watching someone else dissect that movie, have at it. With that said, that's all I have for now. Let me know what you think in the comments and subscribe if you want more of these videos. I'll see you all later. Goodbye.